Hello, everyone, and welcome to Sports Week. Steve Foxcroft in the living room, and it's the COVID edition. And you know, we scour the globe to bring you good guests every week. And we got one who's recently come back to town. It's Burlington's own. He's a Hall of Famer. He's Tony Gabriel. Tone, from the living room here in Burlington as well, right?
And just happy to be talking with you, still standing, and back in my hometown year-round, just close to Lake Ontario, enjoying each day and getting my walks in. I can't run as well with two knee operations that I had with the right knee.
Tone, none of us can run very well these days. I me included, but hey, I want to go back. I don't go too far in town where everywhere I go, your name comes up. I remember I said to my brother today, we used to referee you in the old timers basketball, but we'll get at Nelson High School. We'll get into that with Les Miller and the boys. But the one guy I ran into was John McGee at the Cedar Springs Racket Club. He runs the pro shop. And
Right.
he goes, "Oh, Tone, I used to sell him the Stan Smith tennis shoes all the time." And then you go over to Rosa Land and play there. Who did you play tennis with back in the day?
Well, I had a lot of nice neighbors that were members, and few names come to mind that I enjoyed playing against were Doug King and Ed McClelland. And at the same time, though, back at Cedar Springs, I was getting prepared some top lessons to play the game. And maybe that's why I was getting those new size 13 Stan Smiths. Getting ready for Canadian Superstars, I had lessons with former pro Pierre Lamarche.
Yeah, that's a name from the past, that's for sure. So what was your in tennis? Were you good at the net? Was your serve good, or what was your game?
That's kind of funny. Being 6'4", especially when I used to play doubles, you know, they'd call me Island at the net. And all I had to do was just, you know, reach up, knock it down. And we scored quite a few aces that way. Well, not aces, but we stayed in the games pretty good with those. Good.
So you went to Burlington Central. Back in the day, like, there wasn't as many schools as when I went there, and because you won the M.M. Robinson Award for like Athlete of the Year for Burlington and all that, and M.M. Robinson wasn't even a school, I don't think, back then, let alone it was the award, right? So,
well, actually, there were 4 high schools back then that were Nelson High, Aldershot, Burlington Central, and M.M. And I was very fortunate to win the gold medal for the MMR Robinson. And it's so nice looking back of things that happened to me along the way, because certainly I was not a great athlete to begin with. I don't know if you know my story.
I do a little. Well, I was going to ask you, like grade 10, you didn't make the team.
Well, it's so funny. I was coming over across the street from St. John's separate school into grade 9, and I was only about, I'd say, 5'9" in height at the time. You know, I was too afraid to play for our junior football team, I think, and I played for a midget team, and for Burlington. Some boyfriend of my sister's staff's at the time was the coach. So I went out, and, you know, the one time that I had glory looking at me was on a double reverse on Triple HA grounds in Hamilton. And I fell flat front into my face on the ground.
Well,
and that was my introduction to organized football, because there was nothing in primary or grade school.
Right.
And so the funny thing was I used to work on my godfather's farm on Cumberland Avenue, each summer. And that summer between grade 9 and 10, I grew 6 inches.
Wow.
So I was almost full height of 6'3", 6'4". And I thought, you know, I should go out, try to become a receiver for our junior Colts. And what we used to have is on the board a list of all the guys who made the team after the first week of practice. Well, my name wasn't on there.
And the legend grew from there. Now, we know that you were a tennis guy, but you also were a basketball guy. And I know at one point you scored 48 in a game in high school, correct?
I cannot believe that was my best game ever. That was in now towards the tail end of my career and grade 13. Some people remember we went to school for 5 years in high school. And that was an important year for me. And basketball seemed to be one of my fortes. In particular, that was against our arch rivals, Nelson High School. And I cannot believe somehow 48 points came up as my best game ever. That's
great. No 3-point line. Not that you would be out there drilling the threes or anything like that either.
No threes. And
down low, right?
And I probably hit even a few foul shots too.
Right. Yeah. They'd be hanging all over you. Now, you would have been before Jamie Russell at Nelson then, right? He would have came after you, I would think. You got a couple of years on him.
Right. Now, he had a tremendous career, and that came a little later. But that particular year in grade 13, I was trying to tell you, was kind of pivotal. I'll be okay. Pivotal in my life and career. I had been elected Students' Council president, and you would think that, the main reason or what I looked to do that year was to create a lot of school spirit. And so on the idea of football, I wanted to prepare and get ready, for the fall that was between 1966, 67 that I'm going back to. And I went out to work out just, to stay in shape. After I finished the working during the day at my godfather's farm, I would take my little Honda CC, 55cc, and drive to practice for the Burlington Braves. Wow. With friends like my best friend back then was Eddie Phillips. He had had a very illustrious career in high school, and he was a great halfback. Anyways, I thought I'd just go out with friends to stay in shape for a few weeks. Well, that's not the way things turned out. At the start of the year, I thought I could play for the senior Trojan Burlington Central High School team and play for Bernie Custis.
Right.
But my principal, Mr. Emerson, said, you can't do this. You've got to think about college. You're our Students' Council president. I'm going to leave it to you to decide between those two teams who you're going to play for. And I met a tremendous mentor and person in my life. As you might know, Bernie Custis was the coach of the Burlington Braves. And during those few weeks when I was working out in the summer at practices with Bernie, it became apparent when he took me aside and said, look, all I expect is you give 100% on the field, and you can always go and walk off with your head held high. And that to me always made an impression that this is someone who I wanted to play for. And so I went back and I told Mr. Emerson, our principal, I've decided to play for Bernie Custis and the Burlington Braves. And he never questioned me. And that to me was the wisest decision I made in grade 13 to, we had a 6-4 season. I played opposite Peter Della Riva, who was
another big name. Yeah, another big name, local.
Had a great career for 14 years in the CFL for Montreal Alouettes. And Bernie, to his credit, took time for both Eddie Phillips and myself to take us down to Syracuse over a weekend to visit and possibly see whether they might be interested in us.
So the connection there, Tony Gabriel joining us. If you're just flipping by the stations and go, who are these two guys talking? It's the Gabber, Tony Gabriel, number 77, Steve Foxcroft here. We're in our living rooms. It's COVID, but tell more about Bernie. Like, so his background, of course, for those who don't know, he went to Syracuse. So that was the connection. Now, Tone, back in those days, nobody from Canada went to school in the States. Like, that was unheard of.
It was rare, to be able to get a full scholarship. And of course, in Canada, there weren't any scholarships athletically. And I had no idea as to how successful that weekend with Bernie was. But we went down there. I got to tell you a quick story. They had a field house down there, Manly Field House, where they used to play their basketball games in the winter. And it's a dirt field. And they had me and Eddie working out with a few of the varsity players, a quarterback, and then there would be a couple of defensive linebackers and safeties defensively defending us. Well, the quarterback called what he called a double out pattern, where you go down about 10, 12 yards, cut to the outside, go upfield again, and at about another 10, 12 yards, cut out again, a double out. And these two guys that were defending me, the first guy, when I made a cut, he falls and trips into the ground. I head upfield, and then I take another hard cut. I'm slipping. I'm catching the ball with one hand in front of the other defender, and everybody's kind of clapping in the background. Well, I didn't know Ben Schwartzwalder, Bernie's former coach, and the present coach there was watching what I did. And he says to Bernie, "I want that boy."
Wow, that is amazing. Like, that is really something, especially like for those of us that you think back to those years too. So you go down. So let me ask you this. At that time, were you known for hands? Were you known for running good patterns? Were you known for making a tough catch? Were you known for your yak yards, like your yards after catch? Or were you a combination of everything? Or like, how did they recruit you? How did they scout you? Like, how would they say? What would they have said about the Tony Gabriel back then?
Well, I must say that on top of the questions that you're asking, they didn't have film back then in those days that could help coaches, that normally are recruiting in Canada or across the U.S. They went on Bernie Custis's word that both Eddie Phillips and myself would make great additions, good students, good kids to their program. But if you look at what my story told of that one example where Ben Schwartzwalder happened to be watching and turned to Bernie and said that he wanted me, I heard that story later. What happened that weekend, we were sent over to admissions, and Bernie went inside. The coach must have made his pitch with the head of admissions, and he came out and he looked at me, and you know how Bernie queued it up with his hand in front of him, and he said, boys, we got you scholarships. Like,
Wow.
it was incredible for me. That was the first year that I was on a winning team in grade 13. That 6-4 season with the Braves.
Wow.
Previous to that, I'm going to tell you, Steve, I had a very ignominious start. If I can, that's a big word for a football player.
Yeah.
Where
everyone's running for Google right now, Tone, to figure out what it means.
There you go. In grade 11 and 12, I made the football teams each year for Burlington Central High. But to tell you the truth, we never won a game.
Wow. Now, you know,
when I say I did not have a very prolific start, and,
yeah,
and getting cut back in grade 10, 2 seasons, 0 games won, and then playing for Bernie Custis, and he takes us down to Syracuse, and I get a 4-year scholarship in chemical engineering.
Wow.
And all I have to do in the NCAA rules is to maintain a C average. Right. Good studies through the course of my 2nd and 3rd year. And once again, I think I got a couple of times, Steve, all East honors. And so I started to get recognized a little bit through the early part of my career at Split End. But
very good.
The biggest one that happened, this is kind of ironic, was in my senior year, my last year in 1970. I was playing my last home game against Miami University. And in that game, I tied a school record for 4 touchdowns.
Wow.
We won 56-12.
Nice.
And I didn't realize, but the head of player personnel, Jim Trimble, who used to coach or be a general manager for the Ticats back in the 50s.
Yeah.
He watched that game.
Right.
And he
hey, Tone, I got to stop you there. We've run out of time. And I haven't even got to the CFL. So will you come back next week?
It'd be my pleasure, Steve, to be able to follow up on some of these things. It's been a great time to reminisce.
Absolutely. So let's do that. We're going to wrap up this week's show, but Tony's promised to come back next week for another living room edition with the Hall of Famer, Tony Gabriel. For all of us this week, we got to wrap it up. For Tony Gabriel, I'm Steve Foxcroft. Our director's been Brad Scott. Thanks for watching. Have a sporting week. See you next time.